All right, hello everyone in Facebook land. This is Mike Tanzillo, and today we are going to be conducting our Monday live lighting critique. I'm coming to you live from not my home. I'm on vacation. Like I said, my wife and I got out of Manhattan for a little while. We rented a house out in the Hamptons. I'm coming to you live from this lovely wicker bed in the house. You make do with what you can to get your work done. Um, my hair is shorter from the last time. My wife gave me a haircut. She's very talented. So away we go today. So today we've got a handful of submissions from the Academy of Animated Art lighting students. We have this great one from Eugene. We've got Aaron, who's working on our monthly lighting challenge that you all know about. This is Poker Puss. And Alfredo's making some updates to his Knitted Monster, another character from our asset library. And Kleber also is doing some initial design and lighting on the Poker Puss. To get things started, I tell you what, let's look at Alfredo's out of the gate. So what I did with this one when I was getting ready for this is I went ahead and just grabbed your original because I wanted to show you the amount of progress that you've been making. And I just want to point out that the work that you've done and the progress that you've made has been pretty remarkable so far. Again, you could like you did a brilliant job of adding this like really bright, warm, sunny patch to this image. And what it's done is like you can feel it now, right? Like you can feel the light hitting here and bouncing up and warmth. And like look at the difference between this and the original. Look at the eyes. Look at the button eyes. Look at the reflection in them. Look at underneath his chin. Check out underneath his chin. Look at that bounce. Look at that secondary light filling in his mouth, around his teeth, around the push button on the nose. Like that's what we're talking about. So whenever I do these kind of like mock-ups where I'm like, oh, let's just like take this and make it, take this and we'll make it brighter. Like that's all well and good and everything. But what it does not do is it doesn't accurately replicate the secondary effects, the increase in light in the reflection, the increase in secondary bounce light, and all that stuff is so important. So it is. So people ask me like, if I can just make this brighter in Nuke or in the comp or in Photoshop, why would I do it in the render? And the reason is because of these secondary effects. So I just wanted to point out what a really great job. It's now feeling sunny. It's feeling bright. It's feeling warm, and you're really heading in the right direction. I think that you can creep this sunny bit a little bit deeper into the scene. So I think you can actually probably go to about here and push it a little bit further back in space, or maybe just like soften the transition and like make that go from bright to not quite so bright a little bit further out. I think because I think you can push it past the character a little bit because I think it's nice and it's direct. Like if we squint at it, it's directing our eye towards the character, but like a little bit in front. And it would be nice to just nudge that back into the character as well. As far as the character itself goes, I again love the warmth, love the secondary light that's like bouncing up into it. The one thing that I would do would be just to nudge a little bit more into the dark values, like somewhere around. That might be a little bit too much, but just like somewhere in here. And I'm realizing, by the way, when you guys are watching this on Facebook Live, that it does some compression stuff, so the colors may not be perfect, but hopefully this reads where you can just go watch it on YouTube. The YouTube feed is a little bit better, but just like a touch more darkness in there would be really helpful. And then the third and final thing is just, and while I feel like this might be photo real, that this added bounce light will actually lift the shadows around the feet. The direct contact point between the feet and the ground, it feels like they're like penetrated in and there's not a contact shadow. Just see if you can run an ambient occlusion pass just to get like a little bit more contact shadow there and just around the base, just to kind of ground that character in a little bit more. But other than that, I think this is looking really great, and I think that you've got a really nice piece going on here. So let's move on over to Eugene. So we've got Eugene's, these 4 images from this one animated piece. I think the character, I think everything's looking really great. I like the specularity on the clothing. The skin looks really nice. There's a richness and warmth. I see that you've gotten some more. It looks like you've gotten some more specularity out of the buildings in the background. And I think that's really great. And so overall, I think this is in a really good place. The one thing, 2 things. There are 2 things I would do. Number one, there's a couple, and you can check this as you go forward. There's a couple of, on 2 of these frames, the eyes are doing something just to be aware of, and they're funny because they're inverse of each other. So it may be interesting when this plays out when it's animated. So if you just watch the iris of the eyes, this iris is looking very gray in this frame, but in this frame, if we look at them, they are a little bit glowy and a little bit bright, without a lot of like shadow in there. Not super important, but just something to be aware of, that you might need to like tweak that in the comp, in the final settings. The one thing that I would do is I would cool off the background, and like, again, you can this might not show up in Photoshop, but like I would, in Photoshop and Facebook, I would just add a little bit more blue, a little bit more cyan, not that much cyan, to the background. And then, because I think the tone of the character works really well, it's really just to get her warmer skin tones to pop off a little bit more. And so by adding this like touch more coolness to the background, I think it'll really really help. And you can justify it to yourself, being like a little bit of the aerial perspective is starting to come into play. And just that like amount of saturation would help that out a little bit. And it's maybe somewhere there. But yeah, I think that's all that I would do to this. Watch out for the irises, and then just render it out full frame, and then we'd love to take a look, because I think that'll work out really well. Aaron, good progress as well. Let's take a look at these 2 poker post examples. The hat is looking a little funky to me, and it's almost like I want it to go just from like bright to darker value rolling off here, but it's getting this kind of like reddish shape in the middle, and I'm not quite sure what's causing that. If that's some sort of reflection, if it's some sort of specular highlight, it could perhaps be the skin penetrating. I'm just not 100% sure there. But I would just like take a look at that hat and see if we can't get that to dial in a little better. The other thing that I would really like for you to work on here is building the depth of the scene, because we've got these God rays coming in, and they look really good. They're softer than they were before. The rays are a little bigger than they were before, and I think that's working really well. But you can see it's also over top of this foreground element. It's kind of a little bit universal throughout it. And what I would want to see, let's see if we can mock this up real quick. What I would like to see is for, let's say, like that, if that got a little bit darker, and then we got more contrast in the center here, a little bit more. Let's see, maybe like that. What this will allow us to do is create 3 different contrast points in the scene, and actually we can increase the contrast over here as well. Maybe just that a little bit darker too. Yeah, just a rough approximation here. And then what this will do is, so like this area in the foreground is, take away some of that saturation. you know, like this area in the foreground is the darkest, then that second darkest black point, and then behind it, everything back behind it is that lifted with the God rays and the scatter and everything back there, because that'll allow us to step back into space. Versus we have the original where everything's kind of falling out of the same plane visually. You just want to create a little bit more layering than that. Your caustic lights are looking good, but they're very um, they're very strong in some parts, and like they're very bright. Specifically, I'm looking in here on this tentacle and on those cards, and then we're also just not really seeing it too many other places. So I would say in the areas that it is there, I would tone it down by like 30%, and then maybe try and sprinkle it in a couple other areas. Um, I do really like this out of focus bright shimmeries here. I think that's working really well. It would be nice to get something not quite that super out of focus, but something like that back here where these coins get a little brighter and a little bit more. We lose a little bit more detail on them. Maybe it's just a little bit more blur. And then the other thing is, since our focus on the shot, it doesn't seem to be like the specifics of what the hands of what the card hands are. Um, Not that octopuses have hands. He's holding a card hand. Um, I think we should just brighten the eyes a little bit and really get that center of focus on because we really want to look at the character's face and on the eyes. So we really kind of want to zero in on that area, and perhaps even get a little extra fill light on this part of the face as well. So um, good stuff though. I love the color palette of this. We've come a long way with this one. I should have pulled up the original um, for yours as well, because I think that's been a fun one. Clever, really cool stuff. Love these work in progress frames. The biggest, like, and you're doing a good job of creating these framing elements here on the left and right side. I'm wondering, it's almost like I want to put something in here to just kind of like make this shape kind of frame it in the way that this stuff is kind of framing it in there. I almost feel like this open space can kind of let things leak out. So maybe just like a darker element right there too. The biggest thing that I would work on is making sure that we are getting the color of the octopus's face right. So one of the things that was really nice about the reference was that it had this kind of like richer, more magenta tone to it. And I would like to get back to that. So if you could, let's see. Oh, not that. So like if we could push it, maybe some more reds in there. It's a little bit less. Maybe not that much saturation. But if we were able to push something more like this in the face, what we could then do is this pops off from the background a little bit more. And so I would aim more towards that tone. And then the shaping as well, because it is kind of flattening out. But in terms of like pure render, this is looking pretty good. There's good shaping. I love the pockets of light and dark kind of coming across here. The God rays are looking good. Similar to what I just said in Aaron's, is you want to make sure that we're stepping back into space and feeling like the pockets of our black points are darkest in the foreground, middle, back. But you've done a good job here where everything back behind the octopus is kind of like a wall of atmospheric scatter, and the foreground's very very dark. I do think we could probably, for these midtones, I don't think we should go like perfectly 50% between them. We could probably, because they're like our central focal point, we can go a little bit darker in that region. Than I think would be photorealistic in that capacity, just because we want to get those dark values to pop out. So something more along those lines, just like a touch more darkness in it. And then once you get in the comp, like you want to kind of glow up this lantern and kind of make that happen in there. But yeah, I think this is a good one. The other thing too, again, I mentioned this to other people. I guess I gotta look into this. Is the hat, the visor on the character isn't getting light at the same rate that the skin is, so you may need to adjust that shader because like the amount of light hitting this character is pretty profound, but you're not seeing that reflected in the hat, so you just may want to double check the shader on that. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. If you all have any questions at all, if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to throw your questions or comments in the section below. I'll be circling back around over the next few days to take a look at it. So just let me know what you guys have. And if you need anything else, I am in my wicker bed here to answer all your questions. So I will talk to you all very soon. All right. Happy lighting, everybody.